everybody. Welcome back to our second video about solving quadratic equations with the quadratic formula. Just a quick review. A quadratic equation must be in standard form before you start working with the quadratic formula, and standard form follows this pattern: ax squared plus bx plus c, and it must be equal to 0. Must be equal to 0. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and all of that is over 2a. I've written that formula down on the sheet below here so that we can start working on examples where we're only going to get one real rational solution. In our previous video, we got two real rational solutions. So let's see what the difference is here. Let's get started. Be careful with number 4. It looks like it's following the right pattern, but this must be a 0 on the right side. So the first thing I need to do is subtract 8 to move it over. It's a whole number, so I'm going to subtract it from 16 because they are like terms. So I'll get 2p squared minus 8p plus 8 equals 0. And now my equation is in the standard form, so I can identify what a, b, and c are. Here a is 2, b is negative 8, and c is positive 8. Now I've jotted down the quadratic formula here for us to follow. It calls for negative b. So if b is already a negative 8, the negative of a negative is positive 8. Plus or minus a big square root. Next comes b squared, so I'm putting that negative 8 in parentheses, minus 4 times an a value of 2, and then a c value of positive 8, all over 2 times a, so 2 times 2. Now, I would highly recommend having Desmos open on your computer so that you can plug in the discriminant. Negative 8 squared minus 4 times 2 times 8. Okay, so I've got a discriminant equal to 0. My discriminant is 0, so that's the number underneath the square root is 0. So I'll have 8 plus or minus the square root of 0 all over 2 times 2 is 4. I don't think I need to show you this. I think you know that the square root of 0 is 0, but if you are kind of stuck in a habit and you just need to use Desmos to remind yourself, go ahead and take the square root of 0, but of course it's 0. So I will have 8 plus or minus 0 over 4. Now, in our last video, this is where we broke it up and we did 8 plus a value and 8 minus a value. But this time, that value is 0. So if I add 0 or subtract 0, it's not going to change. So this will just be 8 over 4, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. So now I'm getting one real rational solution. Not two solutions, just one. Okay, let's check out number 5. First of all, this equation is all mixed up. I have to have an equation in standard form. 9n squared is my quadratic term, but my linear term is on the right and it needs to move over, and the constant term is on the right and it needs to move over. To move a positive 6n, I would have to subtract it. To move a negative 1, I would have to add it. So you can really just think about each term changing its sign as it moves to the left side of the equation. But now it's really easy for me to see what a, b, and c are. A is 9, b is equal to negative 6, and c is equal to 1. The key here is getting everything in the right place of the formula. The formula calls for a negative b. Negative of negative 6 is positive 6. plus or minus a square root of b squared, so negative 6 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 9, times c, which is 1, all over 2 times a, which is 9. Pause the video here if you need to. Make sure you've plugged that in correctly. I'm going to head over to Desmos and start letting Desmos figure out the discriminant for me. Negative 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 9, times c, which is 1. I get another discriminant of 0. That's pretty significant, guys. We're getting 0 again as the value underneath the radical. 2 times 9 in the denominator is 18. The square root of 0 is 0. We just talked about how if you do 6 plus 0, it's the same thing as doing 6 minus 0. You're just going to get 6. And 6 over 18 can be reduced to 1/3. So my final solution is 1/3. Notice I only have one solution, and it's because I'm adding 0 and subtracting 0, which does not change the value of this fraction. Okay, one final example to walk through with you. In example number 6, it looks like the quadratic term is on the wrong side of the equation. It's a negative 9v squared on the right, and this needs to equal 0. So I need to add 9v squared to move it over, and make sure you add it to the like term. It should add to the negative 5v squared. So combine like terms, you'll have 4v squared minus 4v plus 1 now equals 0. Identify your a, b, and c. A is equal to 4, b is equal to negative 4, and c is equal to 1. Okay, let's plug this into the quadratic equation. Negative b would be negative of negative 4, so positive 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 1. Careful here, lots of 4's in this formula, all over 2a, so 2 times 4. Okay, if you've paid attention, I bet you can predict what the discriminant is going to be. But third time's a charm here. Hopefully this will sink in for us. Negative 4 squared minus 4 times 4 times 1 gives us a discriminant value of 0. Another discriminant of 0, and that's the key here. So the value underneath the square root is 0. 2 times 4 in the denominator is 8. The square root of 0 is 0. And whether you add or subtract 0, the fraction is going to be 4/8, which reduces to 1/2. So my final solution is 1/2. So this video was all about examples of one real rational solution, and we got one solution for each term. I'm going to box my final answers here. And you guys, it all comes back to that discriminant value. What is the discriminant for all of these examples? Discriminant is 0. Discriminant is 0 every single time. All discriminants are equal to 0. So you can make a prediction here. If you get a discriminant of 0, then you know you're only going to have one solution. Well, of course you can check your work another way. So let's take one of these examples and plug it into Desmos as a graph. I'm just going to take the first example. So y equals 2x squared. I know they're using a p on the formula on our worksheet here, but I'm going to plug it in as an x so that it will graph it. And I'm putting in our standard form. So 2x squared minus 8x plus 8. And look right there. The function only hits the x-axis in one place. It bounces right off the x-axis at 2. So only one solution. Okay? Let's check number 5. Y equals 9x squared minus 6x plus 1. And it has happened again. It is bouncing off the x-axis at 1/3. There we go, a little easier to see. The x-intercept is 1/3. Okay, let's graph number 6 here. Y equals 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. I hope you could predict what it was going to do. It's bouncing off the x-axis at 0.5, which is a half. So if you want to make yourself a little note down here, maybe give yourself a drawing, all of these have what's called a double root as the solution. The parabola swoops down, touches the x-axis in one place, and bounces back up. It's called a double root, and it will happen every single time, and that's why we only have one solution. So of course you could graph to check your work, and now you'll know when the graph matches a discriminant of 0. Okay, happy studying!